I've been working with a bunch of buyers recently who have been looking at condos, and they're fixated on obviously what is that payment going to be each month, because they're budgeting for not only their mortgage and their taxes. And a lot of people are asking about, well, can they change? Can they go up significantly? No matter where you live, that you're paying rent or whatever, you're still contributing towards property taxes in some way. Like your landlord, your property owner is paying them.
You're paying somebody else's mortgage more than likely.
Yeah.
Still.
There's two sides to every coin. For everything that we say, like somebody will have a negative thing to say about it, but there's also the positive side, and you have to just see what makes the most sense for you and what you're comfortable with. But basing everything off of like fear is going to be, very limiting for you if you are looking at it in terms of real estate.
Hi everyone, got Holly McDonald with Compass Real Estate joining us again today. Thanks for joining us, Holly.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so we're just going to chat about a few topics that we feel are relevant to the current market right now. I know something we wanted to talk about was some, like, in regards to HOA dues. I did want to chat with you because I know you sell a lot of homes as well, not just representing buyers, and just kind of getting buyers prepared properly for the market right now and whatnot. But let's talk about the HOA stuff, because that's a hot topic surrounding condos.
Right. So I know I've been working with a bunch of buyers recently who have been looking at condos, and they're fixated on obviously what is that payment going to be each month, because they're budgeting for not only their mortgage and their taxes, and then the insurance is a little bit of a wild card still, and you've got your HOA dues. And a lot of people are asking about, well, can they change? Can they go up significantly? How much have they gone up if they can change? What's like the history? They just want some certainty, which unfortunately you can't provide total certainty. What you can do is you can look at the budget. You can look at what's been allocated for future repairs, if there's any projects being planned. But the dues are there to cover the improvements. And some of these projects are older, especially in the coastal areas. And, prices have gone up. They might have budgeted for it, but that budget doesn't necessarily cover it anymore.
Yeah, I think it's already a complicated thing, especially for first-time home buyers buying real estate, buying a condo. I think it's really easy for people to look at the HOA dues and think, oh, that's covered. I don't need to read through all these documents. Sometimes it's hundreds of pages.
Yeah.
If you really get into like the CC&Rs and everything else. But it's really important actually to really educate yourself on that, because I mean, in HOA, you got the board members, and they're just managing this association and making decisions and voting on it. And you as a homeowner, your vote matters as well. Yeah. But if you just have the approach of, I'm just going to move in and, let them take care of it, you may not be getting into the greatest situation if you don't know what's going on.
That's true. And I think it's very similar to owning a single family house, but you're the one managing it. Like we all know eventually you're going to need a new roof. And, when you do your inspections, you get a better idea of how far out that is. And then you can kind of plan accordingly or not plan. And then that's on you. But with the HOA, you're not really the only one planning. It's this collective, all of the homeowners. But you're right. It is voted on. Your vote does count, but it, because it's a collective vote, the majority wins, essentially.
Right. Yeah. Yep. Just like anything else. Yeah. I know. I mean, I've had plenty of clients come to me even less than a year after they bought, let's say for whatever reason, whether they want to refinance or maybe pull out a second, and their HOA has gone up a couple $100 a month. And they're like, yeah, I didn't expect that, but they hit us with a special assessment, or they wanted to do some work and voted on it, and they're increasing our dues for the next however many years to pay for it.
Yeah.
And that's just something as a homeowner, that you should be aware of going into it, so you're not surprised.
Yeah, and I can personally speak about my property in Eastside Costa Mesa. Great complex, but there are some significant improvements that need to be made. It was built in the 80s, and the exterior needs a refresh. It needs some new woodwork, which a lot of places do. And it needs a new paint job. And it just needs these things that when it's a larger community, these, the cost adds up. And even if they get multiple bids, I mean, they're hundreds of thousands of dollars. Like it's hard to conceptualize as a regular homeowner. And so then that has to be paid for somehow. So what they're doing in our case is they're doing a loan for all of the construction. And then they're passing it on to the homeowners through basically a lump sum that you can either do a loan for and then pay it back like on top of your HOA dues for a certain period of time. So that increases your monthly cost, or you could pay it as a lump sum if you're fortunate enough to have that money. So, I mean, there's different options, but it's still a lot to plan for and budget for. It's an expense.
Yeah, it's kind of, the HOA determines, hey, we need to make this repair. So then the homeowner is essentially forced into making a repair that probably needs to be done anyway.
Yeah.
So depending on the homeowner, I mean, they may be all for it because they want the improvement done, or there's other people that like to put things off until it's a bigger issue, right? And so they're not going to be too happy about it. But I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world. It's just, again, you have somebody else making the decision for you.
Yeah. I mean, essentially, the biggest power play is that it is more than likely going to improve the appeal of your property, the value of your property, all of those things. But like you were just saying, I mean, you may want to spend your money elsewhere, and now you're being forced to do it at a time that may not be as convenient for you.
Right.
But you have to, you're kind of like a team player when you live in an HOA, because it's not just your home. They're typically connected, and everything, it doesn't make sense to just do one unit at one time and then one later. It makes more sense from a budget perspective and a convenience to just do it all at the same time, like the same crew and everything. So there's a lot to factor in, but I think it's really smart to look through the budget once you get that. It's one of, hundreds of pages, or several pages, but it goes through what are the expenses that they have coming up? How are they budgeting for it? How does it track? And if you're really into numbers, that can be a really interesting thing. And if you're not into numbers, you should still look at it.
Yeah. So when you're representing buyers, buying a condo, and they get their HOA docs, are you going over all of this with them, or are you just do you get a lot of questions from your clients in regards to it? Or
sometimes it does depend on how much they want to dive into it. It is hundreds of pages.
Yeah.
When I am able to, I ask for a copy too. I don't always get a copy, but when I do get a copy, I will go through and I will, make sure to let people know, like, this is what this document is for, and like these things you want to take a closer look at. Definitely the budget. I mean, the budget, while it may be like a lot to digest, it's pretty black and white as far as like money in, money out. And then usually they even will have an audit too on what they recommend or what sort of expenses and whether it's well funded or not. So looking through those reports are really helpful. But there's so many different ways that the associations are run. Like the bigger ones are typically more corporate in how they do it. The smaller ones that are either like self-managed or whatnot, you may not be getting very much information. You kind of have to weed through it, try to talk to people and whatnot.
Yeah. Do you get a lot of questions from clients after the fact when a special assessment is levied and all of a sudden their HOA dues are increasing? Or
fortunately, not. No, but I do get a lot of questions during the process. Yeah. Absolutely. I think it's better when they do ask the questions up front so that they go in knowing that it's a possibility, rather than I would hate to get that call later where they felt unprepared, because then it's like I'm not doing my job right for them.
Yeah.
It's a big thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to at least bring up the topic with clients because, again, it's another moving part that, that amount can change monthly. So if they're already going into the purchase, like, hey, we're completely maxed out on our monthly payment, $1 more than this, and we're not going to be able to sleep at night, we're stressed out. Yeah. And then a couple months later, their HOA jumps like $150 a month or something. That's not going to sit very well with the client, obviously. So it is really good for them to go through all this stuff again, because it's almost, condos are almost like a different animal than a single family home.
Yeah.
Especially now with, like you mentioned earlier, the insurance. I mean, the insurance is more difficult as well, but there's obviously a lot of benefits too to owning a condo, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of people just ask about what their fee is going toward. Because all of them are different. Some are covering some insurance. I mean, they're all pretty much covering some insurance, but actually they're not all, because sometimes it's like it's a home in a community that has an HOA, but it's not the type of HOA that actually covers the structure. Like, there's so many different ways it boils down, and some have amenities and some don't. And even when you look at the listings, they're not all input properly. They might just assume there's a pool and there's not. Like, it's crazy. You really have to be careful. Find out what you're paying for.
Yeah. It's funny. I mean, a long time ago, shortly after college, one of my good friends bought a condo in Garden Grove, and I was actually rooming with him. His HOA, and again, this is like 15 years ago. It was, I want to say, it was like $450 a month.
Okay.
The whole association, like the complex, it wasn't very well kept. There was one pool that always was just, there's tons of leaves in there or whatever. It was not really maintained.
Yeah.
None of it looked really that great, but yet he was paying almost $500 a month for an HOA.
Okay.
And it's like, what are you guys doing with our money? Because it was kind of run down. I mean, it wasn't horrible, but it's like, I don't even know what the money's going toward here.
Did he find out? Like, what was going on?
Yeah, well, I mean, he doesn't live there anymore, obviously, but no, I mean, that's just the way it was run. It was just, probably a poorly managed HOA.
Yeah.
Fortunately for him, he did buy it super cheap because it was 15 years ago, and so he made money on it. But that's something to obviously keep an eye out for, is you can kind of just tell, like, all right, this is $500 a month, but the neighborhood's, or it's kind of run down.
Yeah.
Versus other ones that are super nice. And I think the difference there probably is just how the money's managed. And if you look at the budget, you'd probably see what's going on there.
Yeah. Well, like, I have some clients that are looking now in South Orange County where there are traditionally 2 HOAs, sometimes even 3. And it's like, what are all of these fees for?
Yeah.
Now, you do get a little bit more for your HOAs down there, but there's parks and recreation and whatnot built into it, but it is a lot of extra outflow of cash. And so you might be limited to purchasing there because your down payment can't support a more expensive home, but you can afford technically like the monthly cost of the HOA and the condo or whatnot. But it is a lot. You really have to, talk to someone like you to figure it all out.
Yeah. There's definitely a lot of moving parts with the condos. So, the more educating, the better.
Yeah.
It's better to get all of that out in the open up front, so there's no surprises, right?
Yeah, I think so. Well, and I was just thinking too, another thing that it would be good for, like, I appreciate that you go over with clients a lot, like supplemental tax bills that might be coming, because again, when you're buying your first home, you're usually like digging into all of your pockets to find all of your money. And then if you get hit with that bill and the expectation wasn't there that it was coming, it's not nice to get a bill for, could be thousands of dollars that you're not expecting.
Yeah, not only that, but a lot of clients just, they see that come in the mail and they think it's their regular property tax bill, and they have it impounded with their mortgage, so they don't think they have to pay it.
Yeah.
And the next thing you know, they got the 10% late penalty because they didn't pay it on time. Or, if it's a client that's trying to refinance and there's the supplemental bills that are past due showing up on their title report, and we have to pay that through closing because it's late. Like, what? I owe $5,000 or whatever in taxes, and it's a big surprise. Yeah, it's another thing that is good to go over up front, obviously.
I wasn't thinking about that in terms of refinancing.
Yeah, it definitely happens. I mean, I see it all the time, unfortunately, but I try to tell my clients, it's like on my closing call or whatever after escrow closes, that you guys are going to get this bill. It's going to lag because the county usually lags however many months, depending on the time of year as well. But I say, just give me a call when you get a tax bill.
Yeah.
Whether it's the secured one or the supplemental, it doesn't hurt. Just pick up the phone, call me or text me, and we'll go over it. That way you know what to do with it.
Yeah. Actually, I tell my clients too that if they get something in the mail that looks like you need to pay $45 for this secured document to be sent to you, I'm like, no, it's probably a scam. Like, we've already provided it to you. Yeah. So just send me a screenshot. Let me see what they're actually asking you to pay money for and confirm if you need it or not.
Yeah, there's a lot of that going on too. As soon as you close, because it's public record. Yeah. With the county. And then all these solicitors get that information and they send off and they make it look all legitimate. Yeah. Like, oh, you have to purchase this. It's like, no, you don't. that's just, I mean, some of them are even like mortgage life insurance that comes over.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you guys don't need that. Or, there's a lot of other things with taxes. There's all sorts of things to be wary of. But yeah, other thing I wanted to chat with you about as well, since we are getting into the busy season of real estate, the spring market, and it's actually a pretty good market compared to where it was just 6 weeks, 8 weeks ago.
Sure.
Rates have come down a bit. There's definitely, I think we're all seeing more activity and maybe a little bit more positive sentiment around real estate. So if you are a homeowner that wants to sell, what's your advice to them going into the busy season right now and knowing that it's a pretty good market compared to what we've seen in the past couple of years?
I would advise them to start getting ready sooner rather than later, because we never know when the tide is going to turn. Like, it is a good market now. So if you're going to be getting ready to sell, start getting your house ready now. If you're thinking that you're going to sell and then buy, you also need to be getting your qualifications and your pre-approvals in a row. So you know what you can do and what you can afford. I also think that if you're going to be selling soon, you need to start looking at what price is feasible and being realistic about it. Because even though the market is better and there are more buyers out there, which is great, I think a lot of people that are selling, what I have seen is that a large contingent is people that have bought more recently. They're kind of acclimated to the rates that are a little bit higher the last 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
And just remember that when you bought, I'm sure you were competing against, multiple offers and crazy bidding wars. Don't have that expectation now. Like, yes, there are still bidding wars now, which is great for you as a seller, but it's not the same type of scenario. So be realistic about your pricing, price it well, so that you actually do get the type of feedback that you want.
Yeah. And then how about, let's talk too about getting the actual home ready. How far does that go in your experience in regards to, I mean, maybe it just needs a little bit of touch-up work or, they maybe doing some landscaping or whatnot, or staging and all that. Like, how far does that go for a seller? Because I know a lot of people are probably going to be resistant to maybe spending any extra money, but...
Yeah. Well, so there's like 3 different categories, I would say. There is the category of they want their home to show as the best home in the neighborhood. And, that's typically, if you look at a flipped home, let's say, you can kind of paint that picture of it's beautiful, divine, move-in ready. Mm-hmm. So that's going to have the staging. It's going to have all the bling. It's going to have all the wow. And that's going to be like your top tier, let's say. Then you have the stage where people maybe are resistant to staging. Maybe they're living in the house still. Maybe it's semi-updated, but it's not brand new. So that would be your middle tier. And then you're going to have your fixer level, where they don't want to do anything. They don't intend to do anything. They're selling it as is. They're accepting the fact that they're going to sell for less to avoid the headache. Mm-hmm. So in that case, there's not much that you need to do. Now, you could still get a little bit more perception-wise if you did clear the house and do like a fresh coat of paint. And that would be like your most minimal, and like a little landscaping or whatnot, so not everything is dead. That would get you a little bit more for sure. And same thing with that middle tier, like decluttering, making the house look as good as possible, doing some touch-up paint, doing some fresh landscaping, especially we're getting into a time of year where it's starting to look a little bit prettier out there. That will help a lot, because buyers really want the nice, pretty houses, unless they're a flipper or they really want or can't afford the nicer houses. So they've accepted the fact that they're going to be getting a house that they're going to have to put their own spin on. Yeah.
Yeah. I know it was really skewed during COVID, especially with, let's call it, a move-in ready turnkey home versus one that I wouldn't even call it a fixer, but maybe it's just more original. Mm-hmm. Like, I know when my wife and I were trying to buy, when we did buy, but we offered on some homes that, I mean, this is COVID stuff, but there's over 50 offers on the home, and you have an agent pricing it at $799, let's say, or whatever, and then it goes for like $950 or close to $1 million, like just so far over asking. I mean, the home that we ended up buying was mostly original inside.
Yeah.
And it wasn't bad. It was just a rental before.
Yeah.
So they hadn't updated it. And we still had to go over asking because it was during COVID, but it was like $25K over asking. And there was, I think, 5 offers.
Oh, you got lucky.
Instead of 50.
Yeah.
And I know there's still some of that going on because just the idea of being able to move right in and not have to do anything is really, really appealing.
Yeah.
So for a seller, I
Mhm.
guess, I would assume that if they have a home that they're fixing up like that and
Yeah.
it's turnkey,
Yeah.
that their investment that they do, if they have to pay, if they have to
Yeah.
spend a little bit of money, they're probably going to get it back and then some, even in this market, right?
Yeah, so we are seeing a lot of sellers that are putting in that extra investment. They are recouping it because a lot of buyers, just their payments with where the rates are, all of that combined does make it hard for them to have the extra money ready to go to pay for other improvements.
Yeah.
So if they can find the house that they're like, well, this is beautiful and I don't need to do a thing, I just move in, then it's worth it to them to just finance the payment.
Right.
Yeah. So I see a lot of that. I also wanted to touch upon, so if you are a seller and you're thinking, okay, I do need to do a facelift to some areas of my house that are going to really like improve the value and get me more buyers quickly. There are different ways to do it. There are different realtor partners you can work with that are able to loan you money to do those improvements that you pay back. So it doesn't hurt your pocketbook as much. You do it through someone else's money and then you're able to reap that reward and just pay it back at your closing. And then again, you've benefited because now you sold your home for more money. You sold your home and you recouped your investment and you sold it faster. So all of those like headaches of sitting on the market and and your take home is less are alleviated.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I know a lot of sellers, like let's say they inherited the home, it's
Yeah.
family or whatever, they probably just want to sell it and get rid of it
Yeah.
instead of going through all that. But it really does go a long way to do a little bit extra and
I
kind of
think
spruce things up.
Yeah, it very much depends on your situation. So, like in the situation you just spoke about, where somebody inherited a property and doesn't want to do that, then they're happy that they're getting it off of their plate. They're
Hmm.
still walking away with money and like less of that headache of
Right.
managing construction or whatever's going on at the house. To them, that is a headache, and a lot of times people live out of the area or they're dealing with their relatives who maybe are having health issues. So, like that remodeling a house is the last thing on their mind. But for a seller who is looking to move up and just wants to have as much appreciation as possible, they might be more game for something like that. And it's to their benefit because it's helping them get into their next home where they're probably going to be for a while and they want to really make sure they like what they're getting.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It definitely makes a lot of sense. Speaking of move up buyers, are you starting to see more of those?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, well, this is pretty typical for the season, especially, there's so many different factors, but you always start to see people thinking ahead. Maybe they have children, maybe like the school year ending is a good stimulus for them to go ahead and start looking. Like they think that would be the easier time to move, and it is, right? So you start to see that people are starting to get their feet wet and think about that. And we see a lot of homes hit the market in like mid to late April and May. That's pretty much the peak of the market usually for new listings hitting.
Hmm.
And then the inventory typically stays up through the rest of the year.
Right.
It starts to accumulate.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily see as much hitting the market, but like, yeah, that selling season, listing your home is really coming up really fast.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see how it goes this year because we're now in year 3 of elevated interest rates,
Yeah.
right? Compared to where it was.
Yeah.
They were so low before that it was just such a shock to the market
Yeah.
that nobody really wanted to move
Yeah.
if they were sitting on equity because they were also sitting on a 3% or less interest rate. But now that this is year 3 and it's a lot more normal,
Yeah.
it's kind of the new normal. I think more people are going to realize, all right, this isn't really
Yeah.
changing much anytime soon, and we need to move. We're outgrowing our home.
Yeah.
And I think we'll probably start seeing hopefully some more move up buyers again.
I think too, like you just mentioned, we're 3 years in. And so a lot of people do try to wait a couple of years to sell so they can avoid capital gains and whatnot.
Yeah.
And regardless of the rates in the market, there's still been decent appreciation for anybody who bought 3 years ago in our
Right.
area. So now they've hit that mark. They can sell capital gain free, pocket like what, 100,000, maybe more, depending on where they're located, and use that to move up. And their interest rate is going to be like pretty similar to what they would have gotten in the last 3 years anyway. So
Right.
this is like the prime time to
Yeah.
just get yourself to that next level.
That's a really good point. Yeah, because 3 years ago, home prices versus now, they're obviously higher now,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
people, even if they bought with a 5 or 6% interest rate
Yeah.
in 2022, let's say, they've gained a lot of equity, plus they've been paying down their mortgage through amortization, and it is starting to make more sense now, whereas maybe it didn't last year.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
for them, that bump in payment because of the interest rate isn't gonna, they're still gonna have a bump in payment. Obviously, if they're moving up in the same area,
Right.
because, you know, the houses are worth more, the taxes are more. Yes, there's all those factors. But your interest rate, which a lot of people seem very fixated on,
Yeah.
is gonna be pretty lateral. So
Right.
it's not as big of a pill to swallow. And usually when you're moving up, you usually, you know, have more income and all these things to offset it, plus the equity. So it could really be a good move for people.
Yeah, I know a lot of people do focus on the rate. Seems like that's the number one thing, but I always try to steer them back to the overall payment,
Yeah.
just because that's what it comes down to. Every month you're making that payment. Are you okay with it or not?
Yeah.
And then also remind them, I mean, assuming there isn't an HOA that's gonna go up or something, but essentially that's the worst their payment's gonna get, right? Because they're locking in, and assuming they don't do any new financing, it's like you're locked in at that payment.
Yeah.
So it's not going to get any worse. And hopefully at some point, knock on wood, rates come down to a more realistic level, maybe 5% or whatever.
Yeah.
And you refinance into that rate, and then your payment's way lower than what you were already okay with, right?
Well, I like to look at it like we are in a beautiful time in the market because right now you can buy a home, expect that at some point you're going to get the call from Jason saying, cool, you can refi, your payment's going to go down like $400 a month. Everybody gets excited. So that's the big positive right here. But if you bought 4 years ago, you're never going to get that call. You're going to be like, you get the call of, hey, you're locked into your home till death if you don't want to let go of your rate. So for anybody buying right now, this is such a more positive time.
Yeah, oh, for sure. Yeah. And again, it's like you said, you're locking in at the payment now. If you're okay with it for now,
Yeah.
then it can only potentially get better for you in the future if rates drop. Yeah, totally. What else are you seeing that you think is pertinent to the market right now?
So I am seeing a lot of multiple offer situations happening, especially in, let's say, the lower price points, which is entry level, which indicates that there are a ton of first time buyers out there. They're out. Their lives are shifting. They want to own a home, but they can't afford a lot, you know? So I'm seeing that those properties are getting multiple offers. They are going over asking. It's getting very competitive on them. And even homes that have sat on the market over the holidays are getting scooped up now, because if they're in that price point, the buyers are finally out again. Maybe they're getting the headlines finally about, rates are a little bit better, and also like, we're past the holidays. So there's just more people out there looking. So if you're a buyer that's out there now, expect it to be a little bit competitive. Like, you need to have that reality check. So, going in that you do need to be as, ready to go as possible and have your financing dialed in and understand what it means to make a competitive offer. It's not just about price. The price is typically the biggest thing, but there's a lot of factors timing wise and how secure you are that can be kind of triggered to make you look like the best offer.
Yeah, I know the price is a big thing too. Especially for first-time home buyers, make sure that you're working with somebody that's going to go over all the scenarios with you, because if you are in a situation where there's multiple offers and maybe it's going above asking and you're dead set on not going over X amount of dollars on the purchase price, but it only takes maybe another $5,000 and you win the bid, what does that actually look like with your payment and long term and everything? Like how much more expensive is that going to be? It really isn't that much more. And if it comes down to getting the home or not, you may actually be losing money by passing up on it. So I think it's really important, and I try to educate my clients on all that stuff. Like, hey, send me any scenario, any purchase price. Let's look at the payment. Let's look at the differences.
Yeah.
And see if it still makes sense for you.
Yeah, and I think what a lot of people are starting to realize that have been looking over the holidays and, there wasn't a lot of inventory and, maybe they didn't find their dream home then. And now they're starting to look at what those homes sold for in January, February, and what the new homes coming on the market are asking. The values are just they're going up. Like
Right.
it's so normal. I've always preached that, if you can buy at the end of the year, you're likely going to get the best price and the best deal. But I understand there may not be as much to look at. The timing may not be ideal for you or whatnot. But if you are just sniffing out a deal, like you're not going to get it in March, April, May. So
Right. Yeah.
it's very unlikely.
Yeah. It's funny how that shift happens. It seems to happen like right after the Super Bowl almost. It's
It does.
like, okay, everybody went to sleep as of Thanksgiving, and then through the holidays and through January
Yeah.
a bit, it starts to pick up a little bit, but it seems to really, really kick it into gear in mid to late February, and then now we're in March already, and
It goes
things
fast.
are real. It's like, yeah, you get left behind if you're not paying attention.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously we don't have a crystal ball and don't quote me, but by June, something that's asking $699 today would probably be asking $749 at
Right.
least. And again, it depends on price point and condition and, many, many factors, but just generally it's very common to see that scenario.
Yeah.
So, if you are already in an entry level price point, you have to be pretty aggressive because the cost of waiting could price you right out of getting anything.
What would you tell buyers who are telling you, let's say for that $699 scenario right now, that they don't know that it might be $749, but they're sitting there telling you, I'm going to wait for rates to drop a little bit more, hopefully by June.
Oh yeah.
And then that same property, and then let's say the rates do drop, say they drop like a quarter point,
Yeah.
but now it's $50,000 more. You're not saving any money. You're actually spending more.
You're spending more and you lost out on that appreciation. So
Yeah.
it's a double whammy.
Yeah.
You waited a few months and you're paying more for the property. You could have been on paper $50,000 richer, or been able to use that in the future for a larger down payment. The way the numbers work, it's better to do it sooner. We all know about 2008. Everybody reminds you about 2008. Yes, there was a cliff. We did fall off, but the likelihood of that again happening is very, very minimal. Things are just so much more regulated now, and we just see it year over year. I could send you graphs and charts. The prices go up. So
I think historically it's 5%,
yeah,
close to it. And then people focus on the 1 year where it tanked
Yeah.
versus every other year
Yeah.
where things go in a positive direction. It's almost like the mentality of trying to time the stock market perfectly.
yeah.
You're never going to get in at the very bottom, right? So
You're never gonna know it until it's passed.
you're never gonna and you're never gonna know until it's passed because hindsight's 20/20. So
Yeah.
but there's just no way to time it perfectly. And if you have the mindset of I'm gonna wait for rates to drop or I'm gonna wait for home prices to drop, you're always gonna be waiting.
Yeah.
And then everything's just gonna pass you by.
Yeah, and then you're also either way, month over month, you're still gonna have to be paying to live somewhere unless you're able to live with, say, a family member for free. Okay. That's a great scenario. No money out of your pocket. But if you are looking to use your home as somewhere to, start growing what you've invested and also providing shelter, then you got to do it. You just have to take the plunge.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
The sooner the better. There's so many great programs out there. And there's also, I think a lot of it just boils down to just being educated on how it all works and what your options are. So I think a lot of people just get scared because they don't understand.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the biggest piece, I think, is they're not educated on the entire process and looking at it from every angle, not just from one angle. And or maybe they've got their expert family members in their ear that don't even own a home telling
Yeah.
them not to do it or whatever is going on. But it's really important to get educated on all that, which is why working with an expert who can explain everything to you and go over, and not even in a pressured way or anything, but just, hey, this is how it works. This is your taxes. This is your insurance. This is your rate,
Yeah.
price, everything. Let's look at the different scenarios, and that way you can make a well-informed decision.
Yeah, and no matter where you live that you're paying rent or whatever, you're still contributing towards property taxes in some way. Like your landlord, your property owner is paying
You're
them.
paying somebody else's mortgage more than likely,
Yeah, but you're
right?
not, I mean, obviously I'm not an accountant or CPA, but you're not getting that right off yourself. But when you
Right.
own, there's all these, different benefits. Even high interest rates have their benefits on, a tax return. So,
It's true, yeah.
yeah.
When interest rates are higher, you get the tax deduction.
Yeah.
When rates are lower, you're saving more money through your mortgage being lower, but you don't have the same tax write-off.
Yeah.
But your payment's a lot lower, so you're still saving versus the higher interest rates. So there's definitely positives
There's
still.
there's two sides to every coin. For everything that we say, like somebody will have a negative thing to say about it, but there's also the positive side, and you have to just see what makes the most sense for you and what you're comfortable with. But basing everything off of like fear is going to be, very limiting for you if you are looking at it in terms of real estate.
Yeah, I mean, well, those are the people that aren't gonna, they're just not gonna act at that point because
Yeah.
they're gonna find a reason to not do
Yeah.
it, right? And then they're, then real estate's just gonna pass them by. It's funny. I had a client who, and this is also just knowing your clients
Yeah.
and communicating with them in a way that makes sense to them. But he was so numbers oriented, and this was a couple years ago. The rates were like around 6% still, whatever it was, and he was not going to buy this place over in Newport because
Uh-huh.
it was just too expensive. Until I told him about, well, hey, you're going to have a much larger tax write off.
Uh-huh.
And I said, feel free to run this by your CPA, but here's kind of what it looks like. I'm obviously not a CPA, so don't quote me on anything in regards to that. But we looked at the numbers, and he's like, "Wow, Jason, if I adjust my withholdings on my paycheck
Yeah.
based on how much I'm going to be able to write off, I'm okay with this payment now," because he was saving several $1,000s in taxes by
Nice.
purchasing the home versus not, and that was the reason why he decided to move forward. So it's there's definitely a lot of positives to it in regards to the tax write-off, and I always encourage my clients now to if that's the way their brain works and they're really numbers oriented, like talk to your CPA about this property that you're interested in.
Yeah.
Tell them, hey, this is what my mortgage and rate is going to look like. How's that going to benefit me with my taxes? And they'll be able to run the numbers for you
Yeah.
and see if it makes sense. Because in some circumstances, between state and federal, you could be saving $10,000 a year in taxes.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, if I could go back to like college, if I had any sort of savings at that time, I would have totally bought a place and like rented it out. And then even if I thought, okay, I didn't live here at that time, but if I thought, okay, I'm not going to stay in the area, I don't want the headache of managing it, I would have sold it, or I would have kept it as a rental. Like it would have been such a no-brainer. I wish I would have started at like 18, 19.
Oh, me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would have done the same thing, and it's funny because our branch manager Jason Thibodeau has been doing this, and him and I are best friends. I mean, we
Yeah.
grew up together, but he's been doing this since he was 20.
Yeah. How cool.
But yet, it didn't even dawn on me in my 20s, like maybe I should get into real estate and
Mhm.
like even talk to him. I just didn't even occur to me.
Yeah.
And looking back, I'm like, man, I wish I would have done that, especially because in my mid to late 20s, that's when the home prices really crashed and fell quite a bit.
That would have been the
And it
best
would have
time
been
to buy.
the perfect time to get in and get something and convert it to a rental, whatever, take the equity and move up. It just, as soon as you get in that type of an environment when prices are so low,
Yeah.
that's where people made a lot of money.
Well, it's just like
You know?
it is like the stock market.
It really is, yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
also providing like a shelter for either yourself or for someone else. So it's just a different way to look at it.
Yeah.
A useful shelter, I guess. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the best time to buy is now, essentially, right? If you're ready.
Yesterday.
But or
or
yesterday.
maybe it's yesterday.
yeah.
Maybe today is the better time.
Yeah, exactly. But really, getting your foot in the door is the hardest part, and then once you do get in, though, it
Yeah.
just opens up so many doors.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
a lot of people are just afraid. Even buying my first place, I remember being like, "Oh my gosh, that's like a lot of money. Like it's in my savings account. Like how do I know? Like is this the right move? Oh, I bought my first place in 2008, which was kind of a scary time at that time, but everything was kind of working itself out, I guess. But yeah, for the next 3 or 4 years, I'd get my Zillow alerts on my place, and it went down before it went up.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was like, oh, maybe I did make the bad decision. But, so I guess if you were going to be selling within a year, maybe that would be like the only time where you want to just have a little bit more foresight that you could be there for a few years. I always tell my clients, like, buy a place where you could, if you can, buy a place where you could stick it out for a few years. And like, if something changes and you need to move in a year, you'll still have options. You could rent it out. You could sell it. There's different things you could do. But for yourself, just try to make sure you could stick it out. But if you're in a fortunate enough position in like 2 to 3 years, just cash out if you wanted to. Fine. Like, that's great. Just give yourself options, though. Don't feel like you're buying a place and you have no exit strategy, because there really are a lot of different ways to look at it.
Yeah, I think if somebody's going into it with the idea of I'm going to sell this in a year, probably not the best strategy unless you are an investor or flipper or whatever. You have a specific project in mind that you're going to increase the value and then get out, right?
Yeah.
But if for somebody that's going to be living in the home, I mean, most people aren't thinking like I'm only going to live there a year anyway.
Yeah, usually that's the benefit. But like, I won't have to move in a year.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, generally speaking, you go into it thinking, like you said, at least a few years.
Yeah.
And it's hard to argue with, past history with appreciation and all of that. But more than likely, you're going to be walking, if you did have to sell it, you're more than likely walking away with some equity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, anybody wants an equity analysis, I got you.
Yeah, there we go, right?
Love to do those. Those are fun. It's always fun to give like the good news. And some years it doesn't like move a lot, the needle, but usually it does.
Yeah.
In our area, we are very fortunate.
We are fortunate. Yeah. Other parts of the country, maybe not so much, but here in Southern California, Orange County, there's just a lot of people with a lot of money.
Yeah.
And it's a very desirable area. So it's hard to argue with that. I mean, home values, I feel like, are pretty safe here.
Yeah.
And if anything, will continue to go up. And if rates did drop fairly drastically, I mean, even if we saw them drop into like the 5s, let's say.
Oh, we would see a mob.
It's gonna be maybe not quite like COVID, but
we'll see a lot of people.
But the home values are gonna start going up again. Everything's gonna be going over asking. We'll all be super busy.
Yeah.
It'll be pretty crazy, but it's hard to imagine with how much homes have gone up here over the past few years that would still happen, but it's just simply supply and demand.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah. And we happen to be in a place where, there's a lot of demand.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Thanks for joining us again.
Thank you,
as always. Again, Holly McDonald with Compass Real Estate.